I'm David Glenn Taylor, and this is the Voyagers Podcast. What do you think of when I say CEO? Over the last couple of decades, that term has become quite, how do I say this, loaded? But in the best scenarios, a CEO is someone who, by definition, is hired to come in and fix problems. Think about it. A new CEO is usually coming in because the previous CEO was fired. And they were fired because something was wrong and the problem wasn't being fixed. Now, take that scenario and make that corporation extremely visible. As in, everyone in America knows that company. You ever hear of the Washington Redskins? Of course you have. That name has become quite infamous, hearkening back to the dubious roots of our nation's early years when taking land and lives from Native Americans was part of the national creed. The NFL and the organization now known as the Washington Football Team has been working overtime to heal the wounds and create a new, more reconcilable image for one of its most recognizable teams. Bring in Jason Wright, the first African-American team president in the league's history, and the man charged with shepherding one of the most storied franchises in the NFL to a new and glorious future. Simple, right? Jason and I have known each other for a few years, and he's one of the smartest friends I have, and he took some time from his ridiculously busy schedule and dished some amazing CEO wisdom. You're handling the business side of Washington Football Team, and you're leading the charge on the rebrand, naming and all that?
Leading the charge on the rebrand, leading the charge on finding the new stadium.
Right. Yep. And I mean, so I had talked to a friend of mine. He's this freaky smart guy, and him and I were going to talk. And I go, hey, man, I got to reschedule our recording because my friend Jason is going to be coming. He goes, Jason, what's he doing? I said, he's running the Washington Football Team. And he goes, are you serious? And I was like, yeah. I said, he goes, and then he stops and he's just like, because he's super smart. He goes, that's the hardest job in sports right now. Are you finding it to be a satisfying challenge or like?
Yeah, you know what's interesting is it is hard, but it's not difficult. And I think there's a difference.
Okay, explain that.
The way I've been wording it to other people is the challenges are real, but the solutions are simple. Those solutions are very hard to implement in practice, but they're not complex to understand. And so from the very beginning, I think before I joined the organization, just from talking to Dan and Tanya, our owners, talking to people around the league, observing outside in, I kind of had a hypothesis on what the 3 or 4 things that needed to be put in place were to really unlock the potential of this organization. Mm-hmm. Those have turned out to be correct.
Right.
But all of the things are discovered in the interim that need to fall into place. The history of a place that, hasn't had healthy culture for a long time. There's an amount of trauma that exists in the organization. And so while you have a very simple solution around, we need best-in-class HR practices and a people strategy and talent management strategy and performance reviews and all this stuff that if we get those pipes, so to speak, in place around the house, the water will start to flow and it'll be no issue. Putting that into place in an environment where people over time have not been able to be their healthy selves makes the path to getting all of that in place much more challenging. It takes time. It takes more effort to put it in. Right. It takes clearing more things out as you try to put those things in place. You discover other things that have been going on.
Right.
And so I think it's both trying to steward people well, be kind to them, treat them well, model the new culture we want.
Yeah.
While also being at the same time instinctual and very fact-based and matter of fact.
Right.
About what has to be done now, whether that's somebody who can no longer work in the organization just because of the moment we're in and the trauma people have experienced, or maybe another case you would make a different decision. And you have to be a bit instinctual in those moments and swift because it's just not a normal environment when an organization has been through some of the things like this organization has been through.
So you come into the job, I mean, obviously knowing, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So when you discover something new that needs to be fixed, it's not like you're like shocked by it, right? Mm-hmm. Does it drain you?
It can. I think what I'm taking a ton of energy from are some of the people I'm working with.
Sure.
You know, I started off by ensuring I brought 2 people with me from my previous company
Right.
that were deeply trusted. My assistant from my previous company, who now is in like a bigger role here with us now, and the smartest analyst that I ever worked with at my
Right.
previous company. She was coming out of graduate school and getting ready to go back to my old company. And I said, hey, I got another idea for you.
Sure.
And I think the 2 of them, plus a couple of advisors I brought on that are also folks that I know deeply, sort of formed an initial core team while I was getting up to speed.
Sure.
That was a place of safety, of respite, of re-energizing, of mutual support, of the opportunity to be my full self, when as a chief executive, you don't often get the opportunity to be your full self.
Right. Yeah.
All of that has been very helpful. And then also it's been important to really ground myself in my other practices for re-energizing myself. And,
Right.
you know, I keep those a little bit secret. They're mine. Those I've had to, you know, really integrate into my daily life in a really important way. And then I think the other thing that has helped is in the interview process, I was very, very candid with Dan and Tanya, the owners of the club. And they were very, very candid with me. I was candid about, you know, my misgivings, the things I was worried about with this role. I was candid and straightforward about what I'd heard about what it's like to work with them. And they were very candid with me in response of, you know, the things that they wanted to probe on in my background and experience, the gaps that I might have
Sure.
in my experience. But at the end of it, we all got to the point where we were talking about what we had learned over a
Right.
period of time,
Yeah.
how we were different or wanted to be different. And so I think that starting point of it's not exactly honesty. It's not quite openness. It's something like rawness. I can't quite describe it, but that was the starting point for me and the owners. And so that also is a place you can always retreat to in the middle of change and tumult. You know, I talked to our owners today after a tough day for us as an organization,
Right.
because it's not easy to make these moves.
Yeah.
Emotional. There's history there. These are real people, you know,
letting
that
people go. Yeah.
that I haven't worked with for long, but I care about. Even
Right.
the ones from a distance that I haven't actually worked with directly, I care about them. And yes, in the humanity way, but also as part of the organization, knowing that no matter what, they probably wanted to do well in this, you know, but even being able to hop on with the owners and just debrief the day, you know, without filter is a good place to be and can be energizing in its own way.
Yeah. Like you just, like last time I saw you, you were exhausted. And you can also feel that it was almost like you were standing on ground that wasn't as stable, but you feel like you're it's like you're on some solid ground right now.
That's good. Yeah, I think there are multiple factors to that. I approach a day like this with great trepidation and prayer, like classic biblical, like fear and trembling.
Right.
Knowing not because I was actually afraid. I mean, it's in one sense very straightforward, and you can take an approach that is very emotionally detached and execute perfectly well.
Right.
But I knew this was a really important day for our organization and an important day for the people I'd be talking to.
Sure.
And so I found the time to, you know, engage in that way prior to these conversations. So I think that helped a lot. I took the time, and I think that helped in multiple ways to make sure I had the spiritual and emotional resources to navigate the day. I also think that we have a plan for this organization. And this was something that was central to the plan. And so the act of moving on something that we knew was a key cog in helping us move towards the culture that we want to have, unlocking the latent innovation that's in this organization and getting on the solid ground that will allow us to do these very cool things we have in front of us.
Right.
Rebranding a new stadium, developing new businesses, having that structure, that vision, and executing on it, it starts to feel like you're in the right place. And I actually had this experience today, and this is probably why I feel especially grounded today. I just realized this. Before I had these challenging conversations, I had around a call around noon today with the CEO of the Dallas Mavericks. Her name's Cynthia Marshall. We got put in touch by a mutual contact, and she's a person of faith and just deeply thoughtful also. She and their organization were in the exact same spot we are 3 years ago. And when she was describing what they were facing in the workforce and the things that they set out to do and the steps they took, it was like we were listening to ourselves.
Oh, wow.
And I think both myself, my chief of staff, my administrative officer, like we were almost overwhelmed with emotion to feel not alone in it, to see that there was a path out the other side. Like, I think we knew that, but you're never sure you're doing it right.
Right. Yeah.
You're never sure you're doing it right. And to hear somebody else play back to us, we figured this out. Here were the big things we needed to do. And these are all things that we were doing.
Right.
It was so encouraging on
Yeah.
a day when we were getting ready to make some of these biggest moves. And she was describing, the first couple months, once we figured out the organization, it was me sitting in my office with my head down praying, knowing someone was going to get escorted out by security.
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is remarkable. All the way to the point of we were talking about establishing values and a mission statement, which is something I'm actively doing right now. And her saying their tagline for their values and all that. And I won't share what it is, but it was literally what me and my new head of external engagement and communications were talking about this morning.
Oh, wow.
It was the same tagline verbatim.
Wow.
It was a moment of just deep confirmation of, hey, bruh, in case you had it twisted, I know you've been overhearing this and your emotions have been overhearing this. You're in the right place. Thus saith the universe.
Right. Sure.
It was really one of those moments today that then had me enter these conversations feeling supported by something very deep and beyond me and ancient almost.
For some reason, what you're talking about is reminding me of my oldest son is 21, and he's out there in Virginia, and he's just going through what 21-year-olds go through, just that, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I should be doing something else. I should be somewhere else doing something else. It's always, just that. And he needs that right now. I'm trying to teach him that stillness practice because like he can't hear it. He can't make way for it. He feels, and so many of his generation fills so much of that empty space, any space with noise.
Yes.
He can't hear it, And so he can't receive those kinds of confirmations and feel the roots of that. Cause like you hear that from someone and you go, oh, and you're able to connect it back and go, okay.
Yes.
I'm doing this thing and I'm in the right spot. And even though you're kind of in the middle of the hard stuff,
That's right.
I mean, the rebrand stuff is probably part of that, right? In terms
that's right.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big deal.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a huge deal, and it's weightier than I thought too. I would think normally of the rebrand as, a standard marketing thing that happens.
Right.
You do market research,
right.
And you understand like what folks are looking for. You do conjoint analysis. You get your personas in place, and you test ideas with them, all that stuff. Like all that will happen. That's the approach.
Yeah, you're going to do that. Sure.
Yeah. However, that is third or fourth order to a few larger things. One is, a fan base that itself has been through the ringer with this organization, a sense of sort of broken promises and not feeling prioritized and not winning on the field. That doesn't help either. And a rawness, like almost like a raw nerve that's very tender and can be, really acutely inflamed with a light touch, like an open nerve. And so, there is a great desire for a name really quickly. Or another group says we need to really wait because we need to, grieve the loss of the old name. There's multiple opinions on which direction it could go. And all of them feel very personal to people.
Yeah, very. Yeah.
Because it is their club and it is their club.
Totally.
And so it is navigating all of that energetic space around it that makes it, not a standard decision.
No.
And maybe that's present in every marketing thing, but it's just obvious.
Because you have to first recognize that literally every fan in that stadium, every person who's wearing a Redskins logo on their shirt, they're identifying with a personal experience. And that's for you guys, which one of the real bonuses is it's the color palette. And the color palette is such a distinct color palette that's going to help bridge that divide a bit for you guys, right?
That's right.
And I'm assuming you're not flipping the color palette on that.
Nope. Nope. Oh my gosh. They would run me out of town with pitchforks.
Oh, they would.
No.
They totally would. That would be too much, right? That would be too much.
Too much. Way too much.
Yeah.
Way too much.
Jason Wright with his head on a pike in front of the Capitol.
Exactly. Nor do I want to. I love these colors. I've already the burgundy and gold have already grown on me.
Yeah. Can I ask you about two things?
Yeah.
Number one, you guys are a football team. You're a competitive space. You're running the business side of the team. You've got who the coach is running the
Coach Ron Rivera.
Yeah, right. Ron Rivera is running the football side. And yet, when the football team loses, I'm assuming when you come into office on Monday, it's a totally different feeling than it was, say, today.
Very much so.
Right? You guys just spanked the Cowboys yesterday, and you go in today, and that has got to be such a weird thing from a corporate standpoint. You're coming from your last job where you're running I guess you could say a more traditional type of business.
That's right.
What is your mentality when you come in on a Monday after a win versus a loss?
Well, it's we've only had 2 wins so far, so
right.
sample size 2. Yeah. Sample size 2. I guess I number one, I'm struck by being surprised at how different it is. Actually, I would have thought it was sort of more stable and there wasn't a ton of fluctuation. And I don't even actually think I'm seeing all the fluctuation because we're not really open and selling tickets right now.
Right.
Then it would really be all over the place. Our pricing would be changing. Like we'd be thinking about different configurations of seats depending on how we're doing. So I think in real time, in a normal year, it's actually even more dramatic. But I'll note 3 things that are different depending on the result on the field. I think number one, the amount of goodwill that is given between fans and us, right? And both ways. Sure. We're just way more gracious with each other when we win. There's a different listening ear. Our communications are interpreted differently. We interpret what the fans are saying differently. There's a level of assumption of good intent.
Oh, interesting.
That exists when there's a win in place. Right. The second thing is the creativity of our team is higher when we've won. Because when we've won, we see profit-generating opportunities. Right. Because we've got some positive thing to build on. Yeah. And so all of a sudden, all these ideas start to come to mind. We could do this with our sponsors. We could do this with the second screen activation. We could do this with augmented reality. Right. We could do this with, space in the stadium. Sure. When you've won, all of a sudden, something about like those creative juices start to flow. Right. The last one is a sense of oneness across the enterprise. Because I think in general, in sports franchises, and then in ours in different ways, there's always a sense of haves and have-nots. Right. The athletes and the coaches and then the business folks. And then within the business folks, depends on what kind of business folks you are. Yeah,
I don't think people would even – I think when we think about – we forget that there's an HR director and a janitor.
Hopefully there's an HR director. Right. Hopefully. Yeah, and I think after a win, we all feel like we're one Washington football family. Now, I think all of those things that I laid out, I think it is my job, our team's job, to make those as stable as possible, win or loss. Because I think it can be. And I think it's actually the result of us not achieving at the level we can from a business processes, rigor, professionalism standpoint that actually make the fluctuations seem so large. What I see from the best performing organizations is there's more stability week in and week out. And you can have a bad team for a year and still have a thriving business and business culture that doesn't feel tossed about and deep connection between fans and the organization that doesn't ebb with the score.
Yeah, I mean, debatably, you and the Dallas Cowboys are probably the most, and the Packers would be in there too, right? The most famous and kind of long-standing, I guess, as far as a brand identity is concerned for the NFL. Right. Those are 3 of the most powerful brands.
You might add you might throw the 49ers in there, but
Niners. Yeah,
those would be the 4. Yeah, I think those would be the 4.
Absolutely, and yet, and you and the Cowboys are really struggling in that area. Yet the brands are brands like the Yankees and the Red Sox and stuff like that. When they go through all those years and stuff like that, you start winning, and boom, it just catches on fire so fast because everybody's waiting to just come straight back and just love on you and just pour that on you. I know your guys' fan base is pretty intense. They also throw they throw some hate at you guys too. I was going to ask you about the fact that we are a week away from probably the most contentious presidential election in modern history. Yeah. And you guys are the Washington football team. Yes. And the proximity to everything that's going on and how that kind of feels. Do you guys feel that within the organization at all?
Football is a bit of a bubble. I think especially during the season, you tend to tune everything out and just focus on the season. However, in this year, I do think there has been more engagement of what's going on civically. Right. Because the NFL, whether or not it was the best steward, is the steward of the nation's conversation on race and equity.
It is.
And our team has been in that, and I and coach encourage our team to be in that. And in the coming weeks, we'll talk about how we're going to be in that in a bigger way. But one of the first steps towards our social justice strategy was doing something big on voting.
Yeah.
Something that is nonpartisan, unambiguously good, to exercise your civic right to vote. Like, I'm the son of civil rights activists, generations of civil rights activists.
No kidding.
Like, yeah, like my people bled out for this.
Right.
You know, like if I go back, my mom's side, my ancestor Charles Gomillion was a professor at Tuskegee University, historically black college down in Alabama. And he's famous for the Gomillion versus Lightfoot case, which made racial gerrymandering illegal in the United States. And then my cousin, Lisa, was in her youth, one of the few women Black Panthers during her day. Okay. And then, and so many activists and entrepreneurs on that side of the family. And my middle name is Gomillion, after Charles Gomillion. And whenever anyone who is like super fluent in Black history sees my middle name, they immediately ask. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. In fact, one of my mentors is the head of the United Negro College Fund, and his mentor was my ancestor.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah. And so he saw my middle name and he was like, "Are you his people?" That's the way we say it. Are you his people? Yeah. I was like, "I am his people. I am his people." So that's my mom's side. And then my dad's side, my grandfather helped start NAACP chapters in East Texas, and as a result got blackballed by the government, because at the time the NAACP was considered a domestic terrorist organization. Right. So I remember. So when you hear people throw that label around, just remember it's had good company before. Right. He was blackballed from his teaching job, and they were forced into farming. And so my dad grew up on a farm in East Texas, but it was not by choice. They were forced into farming because my grandfather was considered a radical and forced onto a farm, and it wasn't great for their family either. Like he embedded a lot of trauma from that. Sure. But then they had to literally defend their farm against a racially motivated militia, not the KKK, but whatever the East Texas version of it was. Right. And like Hatfield and McCoy type shootouts trying to keep their land, Right. And then my dad was a Black Panther and civil rights activist turned racial reconciliist, but he was thrown in jail in the 60s for peaceful protests. So, my family, and we're descendants of slaves. So my family on both sides were descendants of slaves. My family, bears and exemplifies the trauma and triumph of race in the country. And so, for me personally, activating around voting was very important. And then it was important to the guys on our team and important to our workforce to do something big there. So we also, we did it not just in the hashtag activism sort of way, because I actually think the guys in the league are quite good at that. They've probably maxed out the utility of hashtag activism. They're very good at it. Our job is to help them take the next step. And what we did is, we looked at our assets, which is them and their reach. We got their stories of why they wanted to vote, why this was important to them, and we put those on film and we put those out. 100% of our players are registered to vote. Oh, wow. So we led by example. Yeah. Got 100% of them registered to vote and sending out their ballots. We're using our stadium as a super polling site on November 3rd. 30,000 people come through our stadium. Wow. We're doing vouchers through Lyft to get people to the polls who can't get there otherwise. And then we're partnering with Jose Andres, the famous chef, and World Central Kitchen to feed people in the longest lines in the DC metro area. Oh, so that's awesome. We're going to feed them, give them water, give them a great meal. We're going to do that at the stadium. When you leave the stadium, you get a little to-go thing of food. Oh, that's so we're trying to be more than what the NFL and teams have been good at to date, and that is, promoting a really important cause, which is not to be sniffed at, because it has changed the dynamic and dialogue on many topics, especially racial justice in the U.S. Right. So it's not to be sniffed at. I see our league, our team, I should say, I shouldn't speak for the league, our team at an evolution point where we are able to take the next step. And so we'll continue to do that. The guys have an interest in policing. And so we're going to figure out the right way to take the next step there. There's an interest in our team on racial history and education. We're going to take the next steps there, and we're going to do something similar. So, yeah.
Out of curiosity, is any of that going to involve Native American history, considering the...
Good question. This is the other thing. When I said there were two things around the brand, there's the piece around our fan base and the strained relationships, or the raw nerve, I should say. There is also this piece around Native, original American, Indian country identity that surrounds all of it.
Yeah.
that surrounds all of it. And we have to have, at minimum, a set of substantive, engaged, and committed conversations with leaders in Indian country. And we started those recently. And it has been a whirlwind for me because none of it is as I thought.
Right.
None of it is as I thought. Like coming outside in, I thought one way about the name and assumed how Native Americans would feel about it.
Right.
Guess what? Just like Black folks don't have one viewpoint on everything.
It's all over.
Shocker. Native Americans don't either. I felt like such the detached white man. I'll tell you what. I was like, I am so ignorant. Oh, how the tables have turned.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh, how the tables have turned on me. And so it has been a learning journey for me. We have some ideas. I feel like it's too early for me to say them publicly.
Sure.
But we are going to reset what our commitment and relationship is to these leaders and to these communities. And it will also be something substantive and meaningful. I'm excited about some of the ideas.
What you do is, right after the season, you take a vacation to Maui.
Yes.
To a Hawaiian vacation. Bring your family. Come out on the Kaikanani.
I'm here for it.
Dude,
I'm here for it.
You should. We get so many NFL players out here.
My wife was just talking about where we could go in the offseason because we are going to need, and our family needs one. You know, it's been very hard on my wife and kids. It's a very abrupt movement into this role, and it's been a lot. They're in it with me. And it's been very hard for them. But we're talking about taking a nice long vacation as soon as this is done. But she was like looking at like where can we travel that's safe, etc. She found French Polynesia.
Oh gosh.
Which is actually where we honeymooned.
Where'd you go in French Polynesia?
So we started on Tahiti itself just for a night. We were on Moorea for a few nights. Yeah. And then we spent the rest of the time in Bora Bora.
We did our 20th anniversary in Bora Bora. It was just
awesome. I'm guessing this local spot is no longer there, but I speak French. So it was also
fantastic.
Yeah, so it was also great for me. And I brushed up so I was close to fluent before we went. So just before we went, I knew I was good because about 2 weeks before we went, I surprised my wife. She didn't know where we were going. She didn't know until we got to LAX. And then I revealed to her where we were going.
Oh, wow.
About 2 weeks before we left, I started dreaming in French again.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I did it. I did it.
Where did you learn French?
So I started taking French when I was in 3rd grade. My parents, my middle name, Gomillion, the one I was telling you about, it actually goes back to the Caribbean. It's French. It's Gomillon. Mm-hmm. And it's like my people are from Martinique.
Okay.
They were freed slaves on Martinique. And so as a way to intellectually challenge me and have some loose connection to our family, my parents put me in French in 3rd grade. And I probably took it for a few years, got decent, and then when I picked it back up in high school, that memory from having picked it up when I was young, I got fluent really quickly.
Oh, nice.
I got fluent really quickly. So by the time I was a sophomore in high school, I was fluent.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, it comes in handy there. I mean, I don't know. I will say this, Bora Bora is, I want to take my kids there, but at the same time, I don't. After spending my 20th anniversary, it was the most
totally.
We stayed at the Conrad and the Bora Bora Nui, and oh God, it was just such a fantastic place. And I would love to.
Yeah, I feel like I'm not taking my kids.
Yeah. No, now if you're going to Maui, take your kids. Maui is the island for everything. You have the romance, you have the experience, but it's also such a cool place for kids, man. There's just so much to do here.
Totally. I don't think I ever told you. We used to go to Hawaii. There was a 5-year span where we went to Hawaii every spring break.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because my mom was a flight attendant for American Airlines.
Oh, nice.
For 40 years.
Sure.
And back in the day, in the 80s, you could fly free if you were the family of a flight attendant. And so what we used to do is we would go to the airport. We'd dress in suits because that's the only way you could get in the first class back in the day. So I'd have a suit on. My sister would have a dress on. My dad would have a suit on. My mom would have her uniform on so she could fly jump seat if she needed to. Sure. And we would basically get to our destination piece by piece.
Right.
So it would maybe take a day and a half or 2 days sitting in the airport.
Yeah.
But we would get to Hawaii
Holy cow.
So we would book a really cheap hotel.
Yeah. Waikiki.
And Yeah, like
Yeah.
fly for free and get there. And so we would do a different island each time. So I've stayed, my first Hawaiian vacation was Kauai. We were in
Oh,
Princeville.
beautiful.
Then it was Maui. Then we did Oahu. Then we did the Big Island. And my favorite was the Big Island.
Yeah, Big Island's nice.
My favorite was the Big Island just because I feel like I got in touch with like my wild man.
Yeah, sure.
Because there's so much nature stuff to do. I remember I was a really good swimmer,
yeah.
and we went out on this snorkeling thing out in some of the deep water, not too far off the coast there. And then we found this like pod of sea turtles.
Oh.
And it was, native Hawaiian dude who was like showing us how to swim with the sea turtles. And it was just this amazing experience doing hiking, getting near, like so close to lava. On the night, it was just like, I remember being in Kona and driving around the island on that like loop highway to Hilo.
Yeah.
And like there being like shave ice stands on the side of the road and like places where they were serving like, I don't know what the type of like teriyaki rice stuff that was so good.
Yeah.
Like, and just picking stuff up along the way, grabbing sugar cane and chewing on it. And just, it was a sensory wild experience being there. I went back to Maui my senior year of college. I played in the Hula Bowl college all-star game.
Oh, did you really? Over on Oahu?
Oh, it was on Oahu? I thought it was my year. My year it was on Maui.
Where the heck will we play a game like that here?
Small
what year was that? Well, I'm going to look that up. What year was that?
2004.
I'm totally looking that up because
I'm going to look it up. Hang on.
I'm like, where could they host that kind of game?
Hula Bowl, Maui. It was at War Memorial.
War Memorial, of course it was. Yeah, right there in Wailuku. Yeah, that's crazy. I can't believe you would play a game that size in that tiny little stadium. That's nuts.
Yep.
That's why kids have their like track meets and stuff,
Yep, I have been there for that.
So what we do at the end of the Voyagers is our guests, I just ask them to give the audience a blessing, whatever you want.
I would affirm a biblical scripture that I haven't thought about often, but it comes to mind right now. You are sufficient and you have everything you need for everything that pertains to life and to godliness. I think it's an affirmation for each person listening that whatever it is you seek is actually implanted in you by someone, something at an ancient point in time upon which, you were really birthed in concept and in spirit. And that there will be many paths that we go to seek those things, those strengths, those aspects of our essence, but truly they're kernels within you already. And if you are frustrated in your seeking and you're like me in type A and trying to figure out what else you need to do to get to it, know that you're closest when you're just breathing and being with yourself. Kind of saying that to me too.
And to me, I'll take that one too. Man, thank you, man. We did it. We did it. We did it. It's in. It's in the can. The Voyagers podcast is produced by Sugar Sled Productions and recorded in Kula on the island of Maui. It's hosted by me, David Glenn Taylor. A very heartfelt thanks to Jason Wright for taking the time to get this podcast in the can. And good luck to the Washington football team. I'm a Seahawks fan, but I'll be pulling for that team from here on out as they work to create an electric culture that we can all be proud of. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. It helps me grow the audience, keeps the conversation going, and if you're interested in becoming a sponsor or in supporting the podcast, go to voyagerspodcast.com and click the link to become a Patreon supporter, or just email me, david@voyagerspodcast.com, and we'll start a conversation about sponsorship. Next week on the Voyagers podcast, are you a dancer? Do you enjoy dancing? You'll want to tune in because I had the most lovely conversation with a dancer and choreographer in LA who is at the top of her game. She's dancing with Ariana Grande on stage at the billboards, and as it turns out, is a teacher at heart, which is what I needed. The electric and inspiring Jasmine Raphael. That's next week on the Voyagers podcast. Mahalo for listening, friends.